Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in tonight. And we're going to talk a little bit about Yellowstone birds. I'll just give you a little preview. This PowerPoint presentation tonight is really just a photo series for the most part. You're going to see a lot of pictures that I've captured, and we're going to talk about that through the seasons. And so all the pictures that you see today are essentially an accumulation of what I've captured for the last 3 years. And then I'm going to highlight a couple special birds that we have here in Yellowstone that have a greater impact on the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So we'll get started real quick. Like I said, I like to talk about where I came from because, you know, my whole journey to where I am now is makes me who I am today. Okay. And you guys will kind of understand a little bit more and hopefully connect those dots on, oh, all this stuff makes sense. So a little bit about me. I was actually born in Chicago. My whole family's from Chicago. They didn't like the cold. They said we wanted to move somewhere warmer. So Orlando it was. And I pretty much grew up in Orlando my whole life for the most part. And then I ended up going to school at the University of Florida, and I pursued a degree in wildlife ecology and conservation. And that changed. My whole life changed after that. While I was in school, I got an internship at Tall Timbers. I was working as a fire ecologist. And so we did nested quadrat samples on plants, and we were looking at how fire affects plant species in southern communities. Also, while I was working, still in school, and then during the summer, I worked for an organization called Neon. And I worked as a small mammal technician, but I knew my plants, so I also helped out with the plant team and did some soils work. But overall, we were trapping small mammals, looking at potential disease. After that, this is at this point I graduated and I was already volunteering with the USGS. And as soon as I graduated, they offered me a job working on freshwater mussels. And so a lot of what I was doing was actually working on fish host experiments. So we have so many federally endangered mussels. And so we're trying to there. And if you don't know anything about mussels, they have a parasitic stage in their life where they may rely mostly on fish, but sometimes an amphibian for reproduction. And so we were looking at what fish were needed for specific mussels. So I did a lot of that work with the USGS. Then I ended up moving on to working for the FWC, where I worked as a biological scientist too, which in other words, I was a botanist. I took the project lead on the ground cover restoration project, which we would go into areas that were kind of restored and we would sample what kind of plants came back up. Loved the job. And yeah, FWC was great. But at this point in time, the funny thing about it is I was never supposed to stick around in Florida. When I graduated college, my plan was to move out west. And at this point in my life, I was 25 years old. I realized that I kind of was hitting a plateau where I looked at who I was working with and how high it can go, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to need to go back to grad school in order to get a higher level job. So I was like, I made this decision of I'm going to move out west, go try to get a master's degree, and keep things moving. So I quit my job, didn't have a job out west, didn't have a degree lined up to pursue. I just wanted to move out west. But before doing that, I ended up going down to Guyana, which is not in Africa, but South America. And my buddy was working on his PhD on jaguars. And so I basically tied in with him. I'm like, yo, how do I go down there with you and help you on your project? And so I ended up going down there. I tried to get a grant to, get paid to do some of this work, and it didn't shake out. But the funny thing that ended up happening was my buddy's advisor was trying to retire, and he was like, "Hey, Matt, you need to get back home and finish your dissertation, so I can retire." And so my buddy Matt offered me his position with Operation Wallacea, which was doing exactly what I was already doing with him. It's doing line transects in the interior part of Guyana, for large mammals. And then after that, I ended up going to Montana. And guess what? I had a hard time finding a job in my field, so I had to expand my search. And where did I go to? I went to Alaska. So as soon as I moved to Montana, things didn't really shake out. And so I got a temporary job. This was always in the back of my mind. I had another colleague one year tell me about this job as a fisheries observer where you can work on the commercial fishing boats. It paid pretty well, but he's like, I don't regret doing it, but I would never do it again. So this is based out of Dutch Harbor in Kodiak is where I worked out of. So we're talking the Aleutian Islands and the Gulf of Alaska. Um, and so, I did this in the wintertime, and then I came back to Montana and I worked for the Forest Service as a wildland firefighter. And so I worked as a sawyer on a 20-person hand crew here in Montana and did that in the summer. I realized that the whole fire scene wasn't exactly my style as far as longevity. I wanted to go back into the wildlife sciences, so I ended up moving to Bozeman. And I worked at the fish hatchery here in town, which has a lot of partners within it. I put biological technician. I don't even remember what my title was. The thing is, it kind of doesn't matter at some point. It could be whatever, but you wear a lot of these. You got a lot of hats that you wear. One day I'm wearing a lab coat, the other day I'm in jeans and a long sleeve shirt making fish feed. So it depends on, what you got going on. But so I worked that job for 3 years. It was good. But it wasn't, I was missing that outdoor time. And I ended up picking up a part-time job that is part of what I do today. So this is me today. I'm a naturalist, an artist, a wildlife guide, and a professional photographer. And while I was working at the fish hatchery, I picked up a loose part-time job as a guide, and I loved it. I started taking more and more trips, and as I started taking more and more trips, I realized that, hey, I can do this full time. And so I ended up dropping my hatchery job and going full-time guide. So initially I was based out of Bozeman. Then for the next 2 years, for the summer seasons, I was based out of Jackson, Wyoming. So I was a Grand Teton National Park guide, but then we operated out of both parks. So I got to do both parks out of Jackson. And then I ended up getting this new position with Yellowstone Wild here out of Gardner, Montana, where I got hired on as their photo instructor as well as their naturalist guide. So that's me today. And so, like I said, I work, every season of the year here now, primarily in Yellowstone. So let's talk Yellowstone. And I just want to say this picture is a picture that I captured. That's Liberty Cap. And if you guys remember last year, that epic Aurora Borealis that we had on May 10th, I ended up going up to Mammoth Hot Springs, which I have no regrets. I was planning on just like sleeping in because like we have really early mornings. But one of my buddies sent me a picture of what was going on in real life and during that time. And I'm like, okay, I have to go up there. And so I ended up staying out till 1:30. And then at this location, I didn't get back till about 2, and I had to wake up at 4. So I got 2 hours of sleep and had to run a 10-hour day. So that was really fun, but no regrets. So moving on, Yellowstone. Um, just for funsies, there's a raise your hand button. If you've been to Yellowstone, raise your hand. Using that button. Okay. Two, three, four, five. Okay. We got some people. I love that. Yellowstone enthusiasts. Now, when I say Yellowstone, I intentionally put a lot of these pictures. And so if you guys raise your hand, you can put them down again. When I say Yellowstone, these pictures are what most people say. When I sit there and I do a tour, I'm like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Geysers, wolves, bison, bears, Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, Grand Prismatic. These are the typical things that most people talk about, and in large part are the reason Yellowstone was established as the world's first national park was actually because of their geysers. But moving on, we don't want to forget about the birds, right? I put this out here. People forget. I mean, it's such a great spot for birds. There's about 300 species in the park since it was established, and that was from the point in time where people actually started documenting what was here. About half of those species nest in the park, which is pretty significant when you think about that. And then we have about 50 species that are here year round. So a part of that reason is because we have all kinds of different zones. We got alpine and subalpine zones. We have lodgepole pine forests. We have wetlands. We have marshes. And we have thermal areas. And then within all of that, we have different gradients of elevation that provide niches for all these different birds. And then also, maybe there's so many birds because we're right on the cusp of that central and Pacific flyway zones. So here, and then in this picture too, if you guys notice, that is David Haynes. He's our avian biologist. We're here in Yellowstone, and he's looks like he was probably doing some banding on this Wilson's warbler. So we're gonna get right into it. We're gonna talk about birds as kind of as the seasons go. And I will forewarn you guys, winter is one of my favorite times to do wildlife photography. It's almost dead in the park. Nobody's here, and you can really get that sense of solitude. So here in the winter, and look at what I wrote here, November to March. I want to, and these may not line up with exactly how the calendar seasons work, but this is how the seasons work here in Yellowstone. Our winters could start as early as October and can end as late as May. I don't want to say that to scare you guys, but that's just the reality. We almost have two winters. Spring is a lot like it. But here's some of the species that you can find. I'm not going to list them all here, but you'll actually see some of these in the pictures following. And so here's a pair of trumpeter swans flying in the sky. This is during winter. We get a lot of these in different areas throughout the park, but during the winter, the Madison River, because the fire hole dumps into the Madison, keeping it warmer with those geothermal waters, so it doesn't freeze over entirely. Therefore, we get a lot of waterfowl that hang out in that river. Here's a northern saw-whet owl. This was an awesome find that is in one of our popular spots, and you can see kind of just got a little one eye open, and he was just nestled right on this, looks like a spruce tree or maybe a fir tree. Northern pygmy owl. I spent 1 hour with this bird, and it sat on that stick for an entire hour. No, that was not supposed to be a pun. And I watched this bird regurgitate a pellet, and I got a whole sequence of it doing that from that log there. And this is also a photo that got published in the Montana Outdoors magazine. Belted kingfisher on a dive. This was captured using, I'm an OM systems shooter, by the way. And so we have this function called pro capture. And so I was waiting while it was on its perch and was able to nail this shot. Mountain chickadee, again, pro capture. It was flying from tree to tree, feeding on pine cones and nuts and things like that. And just got that birds in flight moment. This one is a Clark's nutcracker. We'll go back to this one. This is a pretty special bird here in Yellowstone, but it was squawking down at something there in the forest. This is like near a feeder, actually just outside the park, but I think he was upset that somebody was taking his food. Gray crowned rosy finch. These come in the wintertime in big flocks. Beautiful plumages, especially when you can get a little bit backlit with those pinks and reds. Pine grosbeak, again, beautiful bird. That was in the same spot that I got that Clark's nutcracker. This one's really cool. American dippers. We'll talk a little bit more about those, but the only aquatic songbird that we have. And look at what it has. Right there, it actually has a little fry. That's a huge meal for a dipper, and these two were fighting over it. It was a really cool opportunity to capture that. And golden eagles. We get golden eagles. A lot of them come as migrants, but we actually have resident eagles that even nest in the park. It's really cool to see them. And right now we have one that's in a pretty popular spot, has one eaglet. This again, Northern Pygmy Owl. Also, this got published in Montana Outdoors as a double spread, just as it's leaving its perch. Um, this is a roughie, rough-legged hawk. Another one that had came down. This is a little bit outside Yellowstone, but still in the GYE. Common raven, and we'll go back to these again, but I want to point out, look at what's on its back. That's not a feather. That is an antenna. So they actually we monitor common ravens in the park, and this one has a little backpack strapped to it. And that way we can track where our ravens going. And one thing that was really interesting is that they really rely on trash during the wintertime. I hate to admit that, but that's just a reality. And but you know what? Corvidaes, corvids are super smart. They know what they're doing. They can tolerate it, they can handle it. That's just what they end up doing. Now take a second and look at this. What are we looking at? Anyone want to put it in the chat real quick? A lot of people, that is a bird. I will tell you that. And we are looking at an American dipper. I like to point this out because you can really see the water that just rolls right off of its feathers. And then as it comes out of the water, it almost looks like it wasn't even in the water. Pretty crazy. Trumpeter swans in flight, common raven with some speckled snow pieces that are on it. Another mountain chickadee. Now, I like to point this out. Look at its tail. It's literally using its tail as a way of holding itself up. That snow crust was just at the right hardness where he was using its body to hold himself up and feed on this. As opposed to this black cap chickadee who is double fisting this it looks like some kind of knapweed, but literally two hands grabbing on, sitting on its butt on the ice. And I was able to capture that moment, which was pretty cool. American Dipper. This one's kind of funny because it almost looks like he's just getting his big toe wet kind of deal. And we still have great blue herons. Again, this was on the fire hole, or this is on the Madison River where it's not frozen over, and they'll still kind of hunt for fish and things like that. Another image that got published with Big Sky magazine of this bald eagle as it perches on this branch. And that was photographed in Lamar Valley. An American widgeon. And so that's a lot of winter. Like I said, winter is one of my favorites. And so I spend a lot of time out there, and it's when I don't have as many tours. So you see me going out there a lot on my own time. But we're going to get into spring here. We'll talk a little bit about those birds. Again, spring is kind of from April to June. And I've highlighted four different species within this list: sandhill cranes, mountain bluebirds, red-winged blackbirds, and western meadowlarks. The reason why I highlighted these is because we call these the harbinger of spring. When these birds start showing up, we know warmer weather is coming. So a lot of people get really excited that winter is coming to an end and we get some other, we get warmer weather coming and we're starting to see things come back to life. In this one, I actually got this, a northern shrike, which I don't know if you guys ever tried to photograph one. Anytime you even blink an eye at them, they will go farther. They are very difficult birds to photograph because, or at least ours here, you look at them and they're gone. That's pretty much how that works. Red-winged blackbird, I think a lot of you guys know what these are. I'll share a funny story because I once had clients, and I told them I was a birder and that I can help them with anything if they describe the bird and they're like, "Hey, yeah, I was, by this wetland. There was this bird. It was all black and had this red patch on its wing." And I and I sat there and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was a red-winged blackbird." And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then, they mentioned, "Oh, well, there's another bird right next to it, and it was all black and it had this yellow head." And and I was like, "Look, I'm not trying to make you look stupid or anything, but it's a yellow-headed blackbird." And so the whole point here is sometimes we keep it simple, and I'll tell you what, I love to keep it that way. This is actually really cool. So this is a flock of pinyon jays, which we don't necessarily get so much in the park. And I'm here in Gardner, and specifically, I have found these birds kind of in one location, and they all hang out kind of right up above a higher elevation there in Gardner. It's the only time I ever see these birds, and it's kind of more in spring. Here is a Clark's nutcracker that was mobbing this red-tailed hawk. And that's just kind of cool because it's kind of more of a quintessential Rocky Mountain high elevation species. That is the Clark's nutcracker, and then attacking this red-tailed hawk. Here's a great horned owl that I was just going on a hike and I was going up this drainage and I accidentally spooked it and it flew out here and landed right on the grass, but I thought that was pretty cool. Here's a more of a creative shot. There's a long exposure photograph, but that is a Harlequin duck. And we are here in Yellowstone, one of the southernmost distributions for breeding populations of Harlequin ducks in the interior. So we always look forward to seeing our Harlequin ducks here in Yellowstone, specifically at the Lahari Rapids. But that's not it. They really seek out these turbulent waters. And so you can get them in other places within the park if you know where to look. But these are beautiful ducks, and they draw a lot of attention when they're here. Here is a juvenile red-tailed hawk, and it had actually successfully was feeding on and hunted and killed a Uinta ground squirrel, and then it ended up flying on this perch. This was one that I photographed this year, dusky grouse, that is displaying here. These are a lot of fun to photograph in the spring because you're listening for them, and you can hear them with those low frequency vocalizations, and then you can kind of target exactly where they are. They're by no means shy birds. Yellow-headed blackbird. And here's what I'm talking about. Here we are in spring, right? This is in Hayden Valley this year. This was in spring. And here is a Swainson's hawk that is perched up on a sagebrush as it's just covered in snow. Around the same time, this might have even been the same day, female mountain bluebird. And right next to that one, we captured our male here. This bird, I went up higher elevation into the Beartooth. Is an American pipit, but another bird that you can find at higher elevations. Western meadowlark. This one I photographed a couple weeks ago. on an evening backlit in flight, and you can see all the bugs that are flying around this meadowlark. Here's our sandhill cranes. I know not many people really get to see sandhill cranes in the snow, but here in Yellowstone, sometimes whether they like it or not, they're going to get snowed on. And then I'm pretty sure everyone knows who these fellas are, but these are Canada geese with their little goslings, but they still make adorable pictures with their little yellow fuzzy goslings. So we're gonna move into summer here. Summer gets a little, things change a little bit. Bird wise, you start seeing a lot of babies around this, especially with waterfowl. So that's always fun. But we'll get right into it. Here we have a yellow-rumped warbler. At one, this photographed this in Pebble Creek. Yeah, a yellow warbler in beautiful plumage on this willow that was right shot at the confluence. An American widgeon in Hayden Valley, which is a phenomenal place to see all kinds of waterfowl. And right now, it's just popping off right now. We have waterfowl all over the place. Vesper sparrow that was on a sagebrush. Horned lark, which is also found in the sagebrush area. Here is a calliope hummingbird, which got published in the ABA magazine that OM did. This was awesome. This hummingbird, and it usually comes back. And I've been trying to find this every year. This bird usually comes back, and I have not found it yet. So I'm a little scared that it may not be coming this year, but maybe, who knows? Maybe it'll show up. Killdeer. And here's probably a nest that if you've been to Yellowstone, you've probably seen, but maybe not seen from this vantage point. Most people go, this is the osprey nest that is in the Lamar Canyon. And most people go to the pullout that is right directly across from it. And so, cool, you'll get yourself a little closer, but this gives you a little bit of background and you can really get the scene. And so I like this vantage point from a photography perspective. Here, I'm actually in a debate right now on what this is. I'm pretty sure it's a broad-tailed hummingbird, but maybe a calliope. But like I said, I'm pretty sure broad-tailed. If you know, put it in the chat. But this was an amazing find. I actually found this on my own. I went to my one of my local spots where I like to have lunch, and I was sitting there setting up lunch, and I just watched this female buzzing around, and then it landed on one of the lowest branches in this massive tree, and then I saw this, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" I've never personally found a hummingbird nest before, but talking about being at the right place at the right time. And then I got to sit there and watch and photograph these little ones for about 2 weeks before they ended up taking off. Peregrine falcons. This is another bird that maybe you guys have laid eyes on if you came here. This is around the Tower Junction area, Tower Falls, right there in that canyon. We have a pair of peregrine falcons that typically nest there every year. And this one was in the same spot. This is another one. Love this shot. I'm pretty sure it's a female cinnamon teal. Still waiting for an ID on this one, but this around the same time, all these little ducklings. This was photographed in Hayden Valley. Red-tailed hawk close to the east entrance. You could see all that dead timber in the background. We had a major fire back there years ago, but really awesome place to photograph birds. You get a pretty different scene going out the east entrance. Uh, Common raven. This is just a bird that is backlit. I really love this shot because it's kind of unique. I call it wings on fire. It's just a unique, different perspective, and it was kind of like a dry, hazy morning. This was shot in the morning. Here's a golden eagle, and I ended up climbing pretty high up a mountain to photograph this. And so this is the closest I've ever been to a golden eagle. which was pretty cool. And I didn't even know it was there until I hiked around the corner, and then it ended up taking off his perch. But this picture is cool because this picture displays those feathers that go all the way down to the feet. Because I'm sure, as most of y'all know, these come from the Arctic, high up in Canada, and that's where most of our birds come from. Here's that bird that you always hear, but you can almost never see. This is a Sora, not only that, but a baby chick. And I was actually on a photo tour, and I had to sit there and sell to my clients. I'm like, hey, I know you're here for bears and wolves, but I'm telling you right now, this is the rarest thing you're gonna get today. And so they were all about it. We got, pretty low. One even took 2 steps in the mud, and the mud just stole his shoe, and he ended up getting his sock in the mud, but we got him out of there. So everything was all good. Eastern kingbird that was sailing off this perch. I just love this shot. It's so focused on exactly what it's saying. And as you know, it'll just come right back and go for another. Chipping sparrow with some food in its mouth, probably maybe taking it back to a nest. And song sparrow. Again, this is in Hayden Valley, right on the water's edge. And then fall. Fall, I'm not gonna lie, I don't have as many bird shots, maybe as you guys like, but that is because I'm focusing more on the rut, things like elk and moose and things like that. But still an awesome opportunity for birds. And actually, in fact, this is when I'm really looking for great gray owls. And I think you will find some of those images, but we will start off with a trumpeter swan at one of the bays off of Yellowstone Lake. This was really awesome. We have American white pelicans here in Yellowstone. In fact, we have a breeding colony of them. You can see some younger ones in here, but they were doing their cooperative feeding, where they work in unison to try to funnel things into one spot. So pelicans are really awesome to photograph here in Yellowstone. Unfortunately, if you look close at one pelican, you can see a lure with some lines. So for our fishermen, this is why we clean up fishing line and hooks and bobbers and things like that. Bald eagles are pretty plentiful around this time. Just this one was photographed in Pebble Creek or Round Prairie. You can get some dramatic lighting, and I love this kind of photography where you're really focusing on backlit scenarios. And this had some fog in it, but here's a common merganser just in the Bridge Bay area. But this is what I'm really looking for during the fall and birds. It's one of our better opportunities to find great gray owls. We have them here in the park. They're pretty elusive, but for whatever reason, during the fall, we start to see some more activity. And so it's really fun to go out and try to find these. And anytime you get to see one of these, it truly is a treat. Here's a Canada Jay or Gray Jay, pretty curious, as you guys may know. They're pretty vocal. Not too hard to find. If you go to a picnic area, you'll probably find one. Bald eagle. Here we are in fall, and so like I like to focus on eagles and colors, and so that's kind of what's going on here. It's more of a creative shot that I took. Naturally, I had left it pretty dark, and then I've kind of painted the outside to make it darker. But here's a great gray owl, and it's sitting on a perch, but it had this natural side lighting to it. And so you can emphasize that with the right camera settings. Another bald eagle as it was scavenging something on the shore. And so we'll talk a little bit more about eagles in a minute. And here's a pair of great horned owls, and that was just kind of cool. It's a nice evening light, and these two were sticking together. And then guess what? More eagles. But I want to sit here and I want to highlight some birds that are important for the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem and have some kind of relevancy. So we'll start off with common ravens, and these are all pictures that I've captured too. So symbiotic relationships. If you guys don't know, we have wolves here in the park, right? We introduced it in 1995. Look at that picture. It's kind of a cool picture of a wolf and a raven looking, at each other face to face. And so ravens will, and this is said that ravens will tune into wolves and wolves will tune into ravens in finding food for each other. And so, well, how does this work? Why might a raven call the wolves over to a carcass? Well, ravens have a hard time breaking open carcasses. So they rely on the wolves to actually tear open a carcass, and then the ravens can cache away and take pieces as the wolves are either, put added their 30 pounds of meat that they could stuff in their stomachs at one time. They could sit there and cache away food. And so there is this more or less symbiotic relationship between wolves and ravens. And even bears. I mean, they're apex predators. That bear right there was sitting right next to a carcass, and that raven was right there. And I actually have a photograph of that. That bear was so upset that that raven was there. It actually lunged at it to get it to flee. But then again, ravens are ecosystem cleaners. They help reduce diseases by consuming some of this waste that is out here, therefore cleaning up our environment. What's really cool, they have unique language and vocalizations. There's a guy here, I'm going to put this plug in for him. George Buman, he is a local gardener naturalist, and he is an amazing, he's an amazing naturalist, and he is studied for so long the vocalizations of ravens, and like a ventriloquist, he can actually mimic one. And so he's literally spent a lot of time in breaking down the language of ravens. If you ever are more interested, I highly suggest looking into who he is, George Buman. And then Absaroka, that stands for Crow people here. It's one of our Native American groups here that borders the park. And in Hidatsa, it stands for Children of the Large Beaked Bird. So there's more than just there's spiritualness here in Yellowstone when it comes to the raven as well. And so another bird super important, Clark's nutcracker. It's a keystone species here in Yellowstone. So how so? You can tie this bird, bears, and a tree all in a loop and how they all revolve and affect one another. And how that works is this bird is one of the main tree dispersers for the white bark pine. And so, how is that important for the bears? Well, the bears, before they go into hibernation, they go through a phase called hyperphagia. And so that's basically just increased eating. Now, why is it important about this pine nut? It's really high in fat. So they seek this out. So these Clark's nutcrackers are caching away seeds all over the place, and the bears can sniff them out. And so they can hide anywhere between 60 to 90 seeds in their sublingual pouch, which is this pouch that they have in their mouth, and actually use that long bill to dig a hole and cache it away. And then how is that important for the trees? Well, they're literally getting dispersed amongst and germinating from all those caches that they don't get to. So we're kind of talking about that here again, the relevancy and the importance of this bird. Well, their disperses of white bark pine, especially with the downfall of this tree, which is really important. We have things like white pine blister rust. We also have mountain pine beetles. Now, here's the thing, those are native here. They've always grew up. Our forest has always been resilient to mountain pine beetles, but with climate change and warmer weather, these beetles are able to stay alive longer and they do more detrimental effects to larger parts of our forest. And so that's been taken a big hit. And then again, these birds, it's pretty impressive. They can cache up to 20 miles from the parent tree and remember where those caches are. So during this point in time in the winter, their hippocampus literally expands and swells because they are remembering so much information. That's a part of the brain that stores memory. And bald eagles, pretty important here in the park. I'll just start off by saying in 1967, the bald eagle was listed as endangered in 43 states, with Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming being one of those states. The main things that really led to their decline is people were killing bald eagles, habitat degradation, and then pesticide use. I think you guys know the whole story on DDT and bald eagles. So here in Yellowstone, we had a healthy population of bald eagles, but it was really the introduction of lake trout that really was the demise for bald eagles. With lake trout, they're deep water fish. And so our native trout is one species, Yellowstone cutthroat trout. We were so numerous. We had so many Yellowstone cutthroat trout in our rivers. But then in, I believe, the 1990s, when they were introduced, it wreaked havoc on our native cutthroat trout. Now, why does that matter? Well, our bald eagles and our ospreys didn't have access to these fish because lake trout are deep water. And so they never had access to them. And they were foraging, they're voracious feeders to lake trout. So they would feed on our Yellowstone cutthroat trout. So not only were the Yellowstone cutthroat trout getting hit above or getting hit from above by eagles and ospreys while they were available, they're getting hit from below from deeper parts of the lake as well. So here's just a number, but in 2023, we had 31 bald eagle territories. Out of those, 11 occupied nests. And then within those occupied nests, only five actually fled young. And so on the controversy, this is how dynamic these systems are. I'm going to go to trumpeter swans and talk a little bit about them. And so I'll start out by saying there were only 70 individuals remained in the lower 48. And that was in the early 1900s. Okay. Because of that, they established Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge in 1932 because that was a natural area where they would winter. And so they protected that place for these trumpeter swans and hoped that they'd be resilient and come back. Okay. By the 1950s, they've essentially rebounded. There were about 650 in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which is about 3,400, or sorry, 34,000 square miles. Okay. And a part of those successes were because of the Migratory Treaty Act in 1918. There were supplemental feeding programs, habitat preservation, and then they found this Alaska Pacific coast population that they took birds from there and started augmenting other places. But to this day, we still have issues with trumpeter swans. Um, a, and a large part of that is that shift with the lake trout because eagles can no longer effectively hunt the Yellowstone cutthroat trout because they've plummeted in numbers. The bald eagles started preying upon cygnets. And so that is often what happens when our breeding pairs here in Yellowstone are trying to successfully have cygnets. All it takes is one bald eagle to come through and snatch up a cygnet. And so we put a lot of work into reestablishing our trumpeter swan population because the populations here are one of the last native Rocky Mountain population, and they serve as a source for other continental recovery.
Hey guys, just
So,
one quick pause. If for those that
mhm.
have to leave, thanks for joining us. We're going to continue past 8 tonight because we're all in with you, Kyle. So no worries. And check our website for what comes up next. And if you have to go, we understand. But if you can stay, please do. Thanks.
So with that being said, I mean, that was exactly how I planned it. We are wrapped up here. Before I start taking questions, I want to offer you and members of the Sawmill River Audubon chapter an opportunity. So I am also a koa dealer and an ambassador for koa. And I want to offer you guys a discounted price on any of the koa Prominar spotting scopes or binoculars. And so I'll just kind of point some of these out. I have here the Genesis 44s. These are 10.5 by 44s. This is what I use on an everyday basis. This is my TSN 99A with an Olin adapter. So those that do spotting scopes and or digiscoping, this is pretty cool. Here's my phone, and you just slap it on, and you can actually just like that take videos, whether you want to do it up and down, portrait or landscape orientation. Um, and then anytime I'm traveling or, going in the backcountry, I take this little guy, which is very powerful still. This is a TSM 55A. So I just want to put that plug in there where if you guys are interested, I can offer you a discount. Simply email me at that kcmformoon@gmail.com and I will get you a quote. Now, this deal is going to end at the end of this month. And then for those that want a coupon code for the Olin scope adapter or want more information, simply just reach out. And just know that 5% of any of the sales that I make from Koa, I'm going to donate right back to the Sawmill River Audubon chapter. So keep that in mind. And with that being said, here's kind of my last page. For those that are interested, and hopefully I've inspired you to want to come to Yellowstone, whether you want to come out here to see birds, I know Anne does a wonderful job at putting together this trip that they've done the last 2 years. I highly suggest you guys signing up to do that trip. It's phenomenal. Hopefully I'll get to take you guys out too because I love my birders and sign up for my newsletter. I will say that. So if you go to that website right there, moonman.photography, and scroll down to the bottom of the page, you will see a newsletter sign up. And then that way you guys can be in the loop for everything that I have to offer. Also, that QR code that's in the corner, it has everything. So you can just take a picture of that. Now would be a good time. And that has my website. My online gallery, which I'll put a plug for, is anyone's looking for some art pieces to fill their walls. I have that available as well. And then social media, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff is right there. And then also, I am an f-stop ambassador, an OM Digital Solutions shooter, and a COA ambassador and dealer. So I just like to put those plugs out there. I want to say thanks for all of you guys for having me tonight. And like I said, hopefully I've inspired you to want to come to Yellowstone, whether it be for a birding trip or a photography trip. Reach out and we'll go from there.